Well, I tell you what, if that doesn't get you psyched up, I don't know what will. Love that intro here on the Steve Finnegan Show. This is not Steve Finnegan, in case you're wondering. This is a slightly less handsome version of Steve Finnegan. My name is Nic Horton. I'm the founder and CEO of a group called Opportunity Arkansas. You may have heard me quite a bit on the morning show, First News, with the infamous Toby Howell right here on KARN. In fact, was on just this morning with Toby, talking about some things that have been happening, some good things, and frankly, unfortunately, a lot of bad things that have been happening at the state capitol over the last 100 days or so. And certainly we're going to get into a lot more of that today, which I'm really excited about. It was exciting to sit down here 20 minutes or so ago and pull up the text screen and see that we already have texts coming in. Most of them, a lot of them, I think, are intended for Steve, but I can just tell already this is going to be a very engaged and very active audience. And so I'm excited to jump into a lot of local topics. I'm a guy, I've been in the movement, in the cause, the conservative cause for, well, I won't even say how long, because then some of you might figure out how old I am, but a very long time. Certainly my entire adult life. And I love federal issues. I love digging into what's happening on the national scene. That's really how I cut my teeth in a lot of ways. I think probably similar to a lot of you. That's what first got you interested in politics. For me, it was early on in the Obama era, maybe a little bit earlier than that, but when President Obama really first started coming on the national scene. And again, I'm not going to tell you how old I was, but I was coming into my own and starting to launch into adulthood and starting to care a lot even more than I already had about how much government was taking out of my paycheck and then what they were doing with it when they took it out of my paycheck. Not very many good things happening with that money once it leaves my pocket and your pocket. So I love federal issues, and I love talking about presidential politics and what's happening in Congress and all the sorts of the news of the day. But I can tell you, I have to tell you, to really set the stage for the rest of the show here today, my heart and my real deep passion, and you're going to hear this a lot over the next 2 hours, is about Arkansas, is about what's happening right here at home, what's happening in the state capitol right here in Little Rock, and the decisions that are being made here. Because there's a lot of coverage, there's a lot of information, a lot of misinformation, but there's a lot of information out there about what's happening in D.C. You can't go anywhere. You can't turn on the TV. You can't turn on social media. You can't do anything without reading about the latest Trump tweet, the latest news out of the Middle East, you name it. The international and national scene gets plenty of coverage. But what doesn't happen enough is a real deep, close look at what's happening right here in Little Rock. And we talked about this with Toby this morning on the morning show. The legislative session just ended a week ago today. Thank God, and I say that with all sincerity, thank God it's over. And as we unpack that a little bit more, I think you will begin to agree with me. And you will share my thankfulness and gratitude that it is finally over, because in 100 days, 94 days to be exact, there were a lot of very big decisions made that are going to affect you and your family and your pocketbook and your kids and your grandkids and the direction of this state for at least the next 2 years before the legislature comes back. A lot of folks don't know that. Again, we get all this attention and all this publicity to what's happening in D.C., and that's fine. That's good. We need that. But your state legislature, frankly, I mean, we could debate this, I guess, but I would argue that the decisions that they make, and certainly the decisions that are being made every single day behind closed doors in the state bureaucracy, in these massive state agencies that have thousands and thousands and thousands of state employees and literally tens of billions of dollars in budgets, that those decisions are affecting your family a lot more than what's happening in Congress and what's happening in D.C., and you don't even know about it. And that's not an insult to you, because I know the listeners of KARN News Radio and certainly the Steve Finnegan Show are very informed. But there's not a lot of folks out there that are really digging into these issues. And that's a lot of who we are and what we do at Opportunity Arkansas. If you want to learn more about our work, you can go to opportunityarkansas.org. I would really encourage you to sign up for our email list, because we're giving you some of this look behind the curtain, some of this inside baseball of how these decisions are being made every single day in Little Rock. And again, a lot of them are never seeing the light of day because it's a state bureaucrat in some part of the bureaucracy that you and frankly even I may not even know exists, and they're making decisions that affect your freedom and your liberty and your pocketbook every single day. And so that story will continue to unfold because the state bureaucracy never sleeps. They never sleep. When you're sleeping tonight, they're still working. They're figuring out ways to take more and to do more and to insulate themselves and protect their own power and their fiefdoms. I have seen this. I have been a student of government, literally in school, but also for the last 15, 20 years of my career, and I've worked in 24 states and in D.C., and I can tell you that's how this works. And it doesn't mean they're all bad people. We probably have state employees listening to this show right now. We probably have, you probably have folks in your family that are state employees and state bureaucrats, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But the system, the structure of state government, the incentives of state government and the state agencies and the bureaucracy are all wrong. And there is so little transparency and oversight into what is happening that, again, is affecting your family and your kids and your grandkids every single day. So we'll talk in depth, and certainly we will open the phone lines here probably in the next half hour. There's a lot of stuff I want to kind of unpack to set the stage for this, and I want to get your thoughts. You can text as well, of course, at 501-403-5276, 501-403-5276. But I want to shelve the state bureaucracy portion of this conversation for just a moment, and I want to unpack what has been happening at the state capitol. Because Arkansas is a little bit unique, and I alluded to this earlier. We have a legislative session, but it only happens every 2 years. And so for 2 years, there's all of this built up energy and anxiety and all these ideas that a lot of times, again, the state bureaucracy and the special interests and others have been working towards and building momentum towards. And then in January of odd number years, your state representative and your state senator come to Little Rock for about 3 months, and they are frankly just thrown off into the deep end of a completely broken, insane legislative process. And I think once you hear me unpack this a little bit, I think you're going to be outraged. I hope you're going to be outraged, and I hope you're going to do something, take some sort of step, some sort of action to let your legislators and your representatives know that this is an unacceptable system. Because this is not a system that's built for you and me. This is not a system that's built for the taxpayers and the people that have to pay for the decisions that are being made at the Capitol. This is a system that's built for special interest and for state government to perpetuate and protect itself. So let me just set the stage here, and let me just give you some context and some detail about what I'm talking about. So let's go back to November of 2024, just a few months ago, but it seems like forever ago. On November 5th of 2024 was the presidential election. on November 5th. And the first day of the Arkansas legislative session was January 13th. So that's 69 days. It's less than 70 days between the election and when the legislative session started. And then you've got, of course, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. You got 3 major holidays in between there. But if you're a newly elected state legislator, you got about 2 months, give or take, to get ready for legislative session. And then in early January, if you're a new legislator, you get sworn in. If you're a House member, you get a 2-year term. So this is, for the freshman members that just got sworn in, this was their first term. Or I should say, this was their first and only legislative session that they will have for their first 2-year term, because the next one won't be until January 2027. So the one that just ended, 90 days, that's it. That's all they get. In that 69 days, and we're going to have to take a break here, so stick with us. But if I tell you what, if you've got a guess, text me. Text me how many bills do you think were filed in a 94-day legislative session? How many pieces of legislation do you think were filed? Because I bet you're going to be shocked at this number. 501-403-5276. You can text that, your guess in. How many bills, House and Senate bills here at the state level in the state legislature, do you think were filed in this recent legislative session? I promise we're going somewhere with this. It's going to take us a minute to get there. So stick around, because I think this is really important. And as we do that, we're going to take a brief break for traffic. This is Nic Horton filling in for Steve on the Steve Finnegan Show. Nic Horton filling in for the great, the wonderful, the handsome Steve Finnegan on the Steve Finnegan Show. And my first time filling in for Steve. I've been in this chair a couple times, but the first time for Steve. So I really appreciate him allowing me the honor and the privilege and the very serious responsibility of being behind this microphone today. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the state legislative session that just ended. Congress gets a lot of attention. What happens to the federal government and the national level and President Trump and all of this, Congress gets a ton of exposure and a ton of attention, and rightfully so. But I'm on a mission to convince you and most people that I encounter that what happens here at the state level in your state legislature is perhaps more important than what you hear about on Fox News and on some of these national media outlets, because it affects your life so directly. And we're unpacking the legislative process. And I have to be honest with you, if we've got any state legislators or state bureaucrats or anybody that's listening to the show today, and I'm sure we do, they're not maybe necessarily going to love all of this content, and that's okay. That's okay. Because it's true, and you have a right to know as a taxpayer and as an Arkansan, as someone who is paying for all of this nonsense that's being rammed through the state capitol, you have a right to know about how your money is being spent and the process for how we're determining how your money is going to be spent. So before the break, and I'll just start over here, just go through this really quickly because it matters, and we're building to something here. The 2024 election was on November 5th. And the legislative session started on January 13th. So you've got about 69, 70 days with 3 major holidays included to get ready for legislative session. If you're a freshman legislator and you were just elected in November, you got about 2 months to get ready for what's coming. And what's coming is a whole bunch of nonsense. And that's not to say that everything that happens up there is bad, because there certainly have been plenty of good things that have happened, even in this legislative session. And we will get to some of those policy decisions that are good, that we've been supportive of at Opportunity Arkansas, and even things that weren't necessarily in our wheelhouse, but as an Arkansan, I think are good and movement in the right direction. But the process of how we get there is very, very important. And as I've even now, just in the last week, started going around the state talking to groups about how broken this process is, I mean, you can just see folks, their jaws just hit the floor. Because people truly don't realize how chaotic and destructive and, frankly, untaxpayer-friendly this whole process is. So if you get elected, you got about 2 months to get ready for session. Then what happens? Well, you get sworn in early January, and people start filing bills. And I asked folks before the break to text in. We got a few responses here. How many bills do you think were filed during the recent legislative session? We got a few guesses. Somebody said 7. And unfortunately, I wish that was true, but it was a few more than that. Someone said 500. That's a little bit more in the ballpark. But would you believe me if I told you that the actual number of new legislation filed in this recent legislative session, and this does not include resolutions, this does not include constitutional amendments, there's a whole host of other pieces of paper that are filed, but in terms of actual legislation that becomes law, 1,652 bills. 1,652 bills. So for a 94-day legislative session, that's about 18 bills per day. Per day. And when I sat down about this time a week ago and counted up, okay, of those 1,652 bills, how many of them have become law? At that point, it was 621. 621 new laws that you and I and your friends and family get to live under, get to figure out how to comply with, get to figure out what they even mean. And we certainly saw examples from the last legislative session with the crypto bill and some of these other things that I'm not super in the weeds on, but they were instructive because a lot of that stuff was done during the last couple weeks of session. And it happened very quickly, and a lot of people did not realize the impact of what they were doing and what they were voting on. And I'm just saying the quiet part out loud, folks. I'm just giving it to you straight. And we will be figuring out at this point for the next 18 to 24 months, we will be learning every day about new laws and new regulations that are coming out of these new laws, and how much is state spending going to go up, and how much is our tax bill going to change, and all of these implications of this legislation of 621 new laws. And that number has gone up, by the way, because there have been more bills signed by the governor in the last week since I tallied that up. But 1,652 bills filed, and more than 620 now have become new state laws in 94 days. And the other thing, I mentioned this in the first segment, I've worked in multiple states, worked in Tennessee and Florida and Texas, and done legislative affairs and such around the country. It's not like this in every state. And I'll give you some more examples of this. So that's the high level, right? 1,652 bills. But the process of how those bills become law, how they get to the governor's desk, here's some things you need to know. In committee, in the House committees and the Senate committees, there are no recorded votes. And I'm going to say that again because some of you are like, what? Did he just say that? There are no recorded votes. So what that means is when, let's say you have a bill that's going to increase your taxes or otherwise restrict your freedom and your liberty in some way. A legislator brings that bill, they come before a committee, they present the bill, there's a chance for questions, there's typically a chance for public comment, and then the legislatures on that committee vote. Well, how do they vote? Because there's no recorded vote. There's no button that they push that says, I, Senator Smith, vote for or against this bill. You know what they do? The chair of the committee, many of whom, I'm going to be honest with you again, are former Democrats. And I don't mean former Democrats like they voted poorly. I mean like they were elected as Democrats and then they switched parties a few years ago because they saw the red wave coming. They didn't switch their principles. They just switched their party. They just changed jerseys. But the chair will call for the vote and they'll say, all in favor, say aye. And you'll hear a bunch of people, aye, aye. All opposed, say nay, nay. And then the chairman of the committee, and this is not a conspiracy. This is not like a theory even. Go to the legislative website, go to the Opportunity Arkansas YouTube channel, and you can see this happen in real time. The chairman determines based on whether the yays were louder or the nays were louder, whether the bill passed or failed. That's it. And the vast majority of these bills that get out of committee, they then move to the floor, and the vast majority of them then pass the floor. And we saw so many examples of that this session where there were bills that really didn't have a lot of momentum, but we just had this default to yes mentality. And, well, I like this guy, and he's going to help me with my bill, so I'm going to vote yes. But that bill never would have gotten to the floor if a chairman hadn't just decided, well, I think the people out of my left ear were louder today, so I'm going to rule this bill passed. We got to go to a quick break. Nic Horton filling in for Steve Finnegan. Stick around. We are just getting started. Hey, Nic Horton of Opportunity Arkansas fame, or maybe infame, filling in for Steve Finnegan. If you want to be a part of the show, I'm almost done ranting and raving. At least I'll take a break from ranting and raving. You can call in 501-403-5276. You can also text in, and we'd be happy to get your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts on what we've shared so far about the legislative process here at the state level. Did you realize it was this bad? Did you know that there were no recorded committee votes in the House or the Senate, and that we're making law based on people's hearing or whether or not their hearing aids are working appropriately on a given day? And that's how we're ruling bills passed or failed? And frankly, I would love to hear from folks like, do you know who your state legislators are? I've been ranting about this a little bit today, but the amount of attention that we give to Congress and the presidency and foreign affairs, all very important. But do you know who your state legislators are? Did you know that you also have a state representative and a state senator? I want to hear your thoughts. And do you know what they're doing? That's the real question. Do you know how they're representing you in Little Rock? We just got out of a 94-day legislative session. There were more than 1,600 bills filed. Some of these bills some of them are 100 pages. Some of the more significant ones from this session were 60 to 70 to 80 pages long. I mean, given the number of bills and the limited amount of time to try to ram all these bills through the legislative process. And by the way, the whole process, you picked up on this because you're a very intelligent audience, but the whole process is built towards passing bills. It's not built towards creating better policy, or it's certainly not built towards reining in the size of state government. It's not built towards protecting taxpayers. It's built towards just passing bills. The default is to pass the bill, and I've got some pretty crazy examples of that as well that I'd be happy to share. Before we do that, let's bring in Paul from Hot Springs. Paul, what's on your mind? Thanks for calling the Finnegan Show.
Well, I was involved in trying to get a bill passed that the lobbyists killed. I thought it might be interesting to hear how they do that. I had worked with Senator Clark, and he introduced Senate Bill 69, which would protect Arkansas residents from title theft. The idea was that anyone could go into their county clerk's office, pay a fee, sign a form that said, I will only sign a transfer of my title in person in your office. And that way, if anyone brought in a fraudulent title transfer with your property on it after they checked it against the list, they'd call the sheriff instead of process that transfer. Well, the county clerk's lobby and the title insurance company's lobby got together and pushed getting that amended. And what they ended up doing was saying that citizens could be protected just as easy if they just started requiring whoever brought in a title transfer to have to give a copy of a driver's license. Well, if you can create a fraudulent title, you can create a fraudulent driver's license. There's a whole lot of Arkansas residents right now paying a company called Title Lock $30 a month, and all they do is help you get your house back after it's stolen. This would have prevented it from being stolen, and they just totally neutered and mutilated that. And to me, that it's not just about what the legislatures are doing, it's what the lobbyists are doing.
That is a great point, Paul, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Really appreciate you calling and being part of the show. I love Hot Springs, by the way. I was down there last week, and it reminded me that I need to get down there a lot more often, but really appreciate you calling. It's such a great point because the whole process, and you've heard me talk a little bit about the special interest, the lobbyists are such a big part of that. And I don't know for sure, based on Paul's story, the group that he was talking about, the county clerk's lobby, but I can tell you there are a couple groups up here in the Capitol, in the swamp, the Little Rock swamp, that they don't look out for you, Paul. They don't look out for your family. They don't look out for taxpayers. They look out for the county clerks, and they look out for the county judges, and they look out for the mayors and the city councils. And that may sound fine on the surface until you realize that all of those people are also supposed to work for you, Paul, and for me, and for your family. And what will really get you fired up is when you start pulling the strings and peeling back the layers of the onion to find out how many of those special interest groups and lobbying groups like the Municipal League and the Arkansas Association of Counties, how much of your money they get. Because they get a lot of your money. And then they take your money and they go to the state capitol and they lobby against good legislation that's going to help you and your family. We saw this. In fact, we may pull the audio and play it in the next hour. There was a bill that Representative David Ray from Mon Mill ran that was going to repeal the soda tax. We've been focused mostly on process so far, but we're going to get more into the policy of what was passed and what wasn't passed this legislative session. And one of the things that you need to know is that your supermajority Republican legislature ended this legislative session with passing only $10 million in tax cuts. $10 million. And at the same time, on the other side of the scale, they were massively increasing state spending. We don't even know, frankly, how much state spending has gone up. We know what was in the approved budget, but there were so many bills that came through the legislative process that were outside of the budget that are going to require this department to do this, that's going to require the hiring of X number of new employees or X number of new contractors or this new Medicaid expansion or this new Medicaid benefit that you and I and all the other taxpayers are going to get to pay for. I didn't even get to fiscal notes, but the vast majority of those bills, they don't have fiscal notes. Like there's no fiscal impact statement or estimate done whatsoever on those pieces of legislation. So when I say we don't know how much the state budget went up this session, I mean, we don't know how much the state budget went up this session. But what we do know is that there was one tax cut, and it was $10 million. And that is that might sound like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. And I want to be clear, it was a good tax cut. It was a tax cut that we at Opportunity Arkansas have supported and have been advocating for 3 years. And I'm glad that it's done. It was a state grocery tax repeal. It was way overdue. Democrat Mike Beebe promised to do it 15 years ago, and he never did it. And we got the job done. Well done. It needed to happen. But if you had told me, and I think the vast majority of Arkansans, when they sent a supermajority Republican legislature to Little Rock, that they would increase spending by $250+ million and only cut taxes by $10 million, I think they'd be a little shocked. And you should be shocked. And you should be disappointed. And then when you start looking at states around us, like Mississippi and Louisiana and Oklahoma, and all these states around us that went the other direction, the Mississippi just passed a bill to phase out their state income tax entirely. Oklahoma is about to do the same thing. Louisiana went to a flat 3%. And what are we doing? What are we doing here? We clearly had the money. We had the money to increase spending, but we didn't have the money to cut taxes? That doesn't make any sense. I don't think the people of Arkansas are going to buy that. And I mentioned the use of taxpayer funds being used to lobby against taxpayers' interest. We had a great, frankly, but horrible example of this with the soda tax debate. Representative David Ray, that I mentioned from Maumelle, brought forth a bill to eliminate the soda tax. This was a tax that was created by Jim Guy Tucker, Governor Jim Guy Tucker, 30 years ago. And it cost taxpayers $50 million a year. But we couldn't get rid of it. The supermajority legislature voted it down. And in large part because of agencies and state employees that you pay their salaries were lobbying and advocating against it. And we saw that time and time and time again. Whew. Not good. Not good, folks. Nic Horton of Opportunity Arkansas filling in for Steve Finnegan. We're going to go to traffic, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Steve Finnegan Show on this beautiful April Wednesday afternoon. I just have to check my calendar here. It's still April, right? Yeah, it's still April. Nic Horton filling in for Steve Finnegan. Appreciate the chance to man the mic today. We're having a little bit of fun. I would love to get your thoughts. We're talking about the legislative session that just ended, and I've been railing against the legislative process. I have a lot more that I can share. So I guess if you want to hear it, don't call in. If you don't want to hear it, call in. Give me your thoughts. 501-403-5276. 501-403-5276. You can text as well. Had several texts coming in during the break here. Someone said, no name on this, but find an alternative to property taxes. Certainly share that sentiment. Would love to stop renting my property from government for the rest of my life. And certainly feel like we had an opportunity to do some more of that this legislative session, and we just didn't, which is disappointing. Someone also mentioned here, Jane, that there is a luncheon coming up being hosted by the Sherwood Chamber. Let me open this graphic here and see. May 1st at 11:30 a.m., the Greens at North Hills. It looks like there's going to be 4 state legislators there that are going to be speaking. I'm sure they're going to be taking questions about the recent legislative session. Representative Carlton Wing, Senator Jane English, Representative David Ray, and Representative Carolyn Brown. Some fine people there. Know many of those, really all of those folks. But I do think even the folks that I know and like, I want to hear what they have to say. I want to hear why we didn't get real tax reform this legislative session. I want to hear why we didn't get welfare reform. Why is every state in the country except for Arkansas looking at reining in their Medicaid programs? We've got nearly 1 million people dependent on Medicaid in the state of Arkansas. And we've got a president now, President Trump, back in the White House, that would love nothing more than to work with us to try to fix our broken Medicaid program, to do work requirements, to do time limits, to give people a little bit of skin in the game so that Medicaid doesn't continue to operate like an open-ended welfare program, which is what it was never intended to be. Even when I say Medicaid, I'm pretty sure most of you thought of nursing homes and individuals with disabilities and the elderly, because that's who Medicaid was intended for. But that's not solely who's on the Medicaid program anymore. Medicaid looks a lot differently than that because we expanded Medicaid through Obamacare a decade ago. And now about a third of our Medicaid program is made up of able-bodied, working-age adults, most of whom don't work at all. And we had an amazing opportunity in this legislative session to start to roll that back, to help some of those people move from welfare to work, to put more money back in your pocket, to free up more money for more income tax relief so that we can compete with Mississippi and Louisiana and Oklahoma and the two states next to us that don't have any state income tax. And we didn't do it. We didn't do it. And frankly, when it comes to income tax cuts, I've yet to be given a reasonable explanation as to why we didn't do that. Well, we've done a lot the last couple of years, Nick. Well, do we still have a state income tax? Yes. Do we still have state surpluses? Yes. Are we now back to being one of the highest in the region because all the other states around us are continuing to move towards zero and we're not? Yes. So why didn't we cut income taxes? I've yet to hear a good explanation for that, or really any explanation for that. And if I were you, and you're seeing your state legislator, your state representative, and your state senator out and about for the next few months or next 18 months leading up to the next session, I would demand an answer to that question. We've got Lamont on the line from Lonsdale. Lamont, we got just a couple minutes here, but I want to be sure we get you in before the break. Thanks for calling the Finnegan Show.
Okay, and I can't remember your name, and I'm sorry.
You call me whatever you want. I'm Nick. Good to meet you.
Hey, Nick. Hey, Nick, look here. I appreciate what y'all are doing. I mean, what your organization, or it may not be yours, but it's one you're a part of, and I need to be a part of that. But here's what I'm going to say. A while ago you were talking about the leader of the House was going by yays and nays based on which was louder.
That's right. The chairs of the committee. Yep. The House chair,
okay.
The committee of the House, the chairs of the House committees and the chairs of the Senate committees, when a bill comes up for a vote, they say the yays have it or the nays have it, and that's how bills live or die.
That's ridiculous. And I'm going to tell you, I'm appalled if that's the case. And I'm pretty political, but I am very appalled if that's the case. Whoever that person is, they need to have earmuffs on, and it needs to be, we need to know who voted yes, who voted no, who proposed, all that stuff on those bills. It should not be one person. That's a hierarchy system, and that's not good for Arkansas, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate that. I totally agree with you. I appreciate the call. And to be clear, there's plenty of blame to go around on that, because this is the way. I mean, I haven't been around forever, but from what I've gathered, what I can tell, this is the way they've always done it in the legislature here in Arkansas. It doesn't work this way in every other state. I've been to other states. I've worked in other states. A lot of times you have an actual recorded vote. I know that sounds crazy, but you actually know how your legislator voted on a bill in committee. There is a process, to be fair, there's a process for that to happen here, but it is extremely rare. And it requires the legislature and the legislators to request the recorded vote. And I've been in the room enough, in the committee rooms enough to know when the eyeballs are flying around and you can tell somebody's about to request a recorded vote. It takes two members on the House side to do that. Well, that first person that's gonna stick their neck out there. I'll just tell you, it's a faux pas. It is a line that you do not cross. That is the expectation at the Capitol. That if you dare raise your hand and ask for a recorded vote, I mean, look, there's footage from last session. They had an organizational meeting in one of the committees, And the chairman said, no, look, guys, we're not going to have any of these recorded votes this session. We're not going to be doing that in this committee. And they just say it out loud and act like it's normal. And to them, it is. But it's how we get so many bad policies because of this broken process. Nic Horton filling in for Steve Finnegan. We got 1 hour left. We're going to dig deeper into the legislative session. Please stick around. Welcome back to the Steve Finnegan Show. This is not Steve Finnegan. This is Nic Horton of Opportunity, Arkansas, filling in for Steve. I have to apologize. I think I accidentally called Steve handsome in the last hour. I didn't mean to do that, so apologies. I fully retract and repent for my statement. But in all seriousness, thanks, Steve, for the opportunity to fill in. We're having a lot of fun. That first hour went really, really fast, and I have a feeling this one is going to go even quicker. If you want to be a part of the show, call, text 501-403-5276. That's 501-403-5276. Would love to get your thoughts on the recent Arkansas legislative session. There's a lot to unpack. We're going to be unpacking this for the next 2 years, frankly. And I knew coming in here today it was going to be really difficult in 2 hours to try to get through all of the muck of what happened this legislative session. And we've talked a lot about the process. I do want to get more into policy in this hour because there were some good things that happened. And I want to give credit where credit's due on that. But there were also some bad things. The policy side of this conversation is not going to be all roses either. Because, look, and I said this morning on First News with Toby Howell, right here on KARN News Radio, the 2023 legislative session was sort of a high watermark. We took 2 steps forward. We had a new conservative governor. We had supermajorities. And the number of wins that we put on the board was unprecedented. And I don't mean wins like numbers of bills. I mean massive steps towards conservative policy reform, education freedom, universal education freedom through the LEARNS Act. Perhaps the most significant conservative win in the history of the state of Arkansas. I'd put it up against any other win in our 150-year history. Massive income tax cuts, parole reform, which was 15 to 20 years overdue. People have been talking about that for 20 years. And nobody had the guts to do it. And we finally got it done. There was welfare reform. There was occupational licensing reform. The list goes on and on and on. And I spent the next 18 to 24 months traveling the state, talking to Republican county committees and conservative luncheon groups and Rotary clubs, you name it. And I pounded my fist on the lectern and I said, finally, we have gone from just being a Republican state to becoming a conservative state. And I really believed that. And I think I still do believe that. I think it's still true. But I also have to be honest with myself and with you and with everyone else I'm going to talk to for the next 2 years that this session was a step back. That is putting it very nicely. And if you want to be a part of the show, 501-403-5276. I would love to hear from you. From a policy standpoint, what are some things that stood out to you this legislative session? Good or bad or in between, or maybe even ugly. I think there were some significant wins. Certainly, we talked about the grocery tax. Anytime you can take a tax completely off the books so that a future legislature can't come back and decide they want to raise it or muck with it in some way, just get it off the books. That's a big deal. And anytime we can do that and just completely eliminate something, that's good progress. And that should be recognized. But my fear, because I've been through this so many times, my fear is that what's going to happen over the next 2 years is a lot of your legislators and a lot of these politicians many of whom I know and respect and appreciate when they do good things. We try to brag on them, and we'll continue to do that. But they only want to talk about the good things, or they only want to talk about the things that they think that you will see as good things. And they don't want to talk about the massive increase in state spending. They don't want to talk about the lack of significant income tax cuts. They don't want to talk about the multiple expansions of the welfare state and the Medicaid program that happened this session. The tax credits, the special interest tax credits that they passed. You'll love this one, folks. If you're a beer and sake producer in the state of Arkansas, congratulations. You are now getting new revenue from the taxpayers and the hardworking people of Arkansas, because the legislature passed a special tax credit for you. And if you use Arkansas rice, which I don't even know what Arkansas rice is. I guess it's rice that's grown in Arkansas. To me, it's just rice. But if you use Arkansas rice, we're going to send you a check. And it doesn't matter if you like beer or if you like sake or if you even think those industries should be in Arkansas. It doesn't matter. You're going to get to pay for it. Congratulations, taxpayers. That was passed by this legislature and signed by the governor. We passed more sales tax exemptions, which again they're just carve-outs for special interest groups. And those passed overwhelmingly. And so that's money now that is being carved out of the state budget, set aside and given to special interest groups. Now they're going to say, well, they're not actually given to them. It's just money that we're not going to collect now. But the point is, where's the income tax? Where's the tax relief for the taxpayers? And look, I'm as pro-business, as pro-free market, as pro-entrepreneurism as you can get. Period. But you know what that also means? It means letting businesses and entrepreneurs and free markets operate and not having government get involved and try to pick winners and losers and take your money and my money and give it to businesses and corporations that they decide that they like. They call it economic development. I call it corporate welfare because that's what it is. It's not any different than when they take our money and they give it to people who don't want to work. And they encourage and incentivize them not to work. It's just Republicans like it more because it goes to businesses instead of going to people. And yet the end result is the same, which is that you and I get to pay for it. So those are some of the bad things that I had on my list. I haven't even gotten to the ugly, the good, the bad, the ugly here of this legislative session. I would encourage you, again, this is Nic Horton of Opportunity Arkansas, filling in for Steve Finnegan. Go to opportunityarkansas.org and sign up for our email list. Because one of the things that we're going to be doing in the next few weeks is releasing a legislative scorecard. And you may have seen these from, at the federal level, from the Heritage Foundation and other great conservative groups that are doing great work there. But this is going to be a state-level, state-focused scorecard. And most of the bills that I've just mentioned here today are going to be reflected on that scorecard. And so you'll be able to go in on our website, type in your address and your zip code. If you don't know who your legislator is, find out who your legislator is, and then see how they voted on all of these issues. And it's probably going to stun you. I'm just going to warn you. Again, 2023 session, LEARNS Act, tax cuts, this huge moment for the conservative movement. I mean, we were all just riding the wave. But this session was a setback, and I think you're going to be really surprised, with a few exceptions. There's certainly some bright spots, and there are certainly some shining stars that are going to do really, really well on our scorecard. But there's a lot of people There's a lot of people that were near the top last session that just kind of fell off the wagon. So I would really encourage you to go to opportunityarkansas.org, sign up for our email list so you can get that scorecard as soon as it comes out. We'll get it to your inbox. If I'm not going to ask for your money, but if you are a donor of ours, you're going to get a copy in the mail as well. And this is the stuff, y'all. That Congress is important. The federal government's important. But what is happening at the state capitol is affecting your life in so many ways that you probably don't even know. And we're on a mission at Opportunity Arkansas to make sure that you know. We got to go to traffic with Rebecca Davis. Nic Horton filling in for Steve. Hang with us. We're back on the Steve Finnegan Show. Nic Horton, founder and CEO of Opportunity Arkansas. OpportunityArkansas.org. And a lot of people are like, Nick, what the heck? I mean, Opportunity Arkansas, what does that even mean? I tell folks a lot. I mentioned in the last segment, Heritage Foundation. That's the best. I mean, look, we're not affiliated with the Heritage Foundation. We don't even necessarily work on some of the same issues as they do. But if you're familiar with Heritage, that's what we are on the state level in a lot of ways. We're doing research. We're doing polling. We're coming up with policy ideas, and we're going and working with policymakers in every branch of state government to try to get Arkansas on the right track, to try to make Arkansas the land of opportunity again. Because we have these generational problems. And if you followed our work at all, or you've heard me on the radio at all, you've probably heard me talk about generational problems. And you probably know, even if you haven't heard me talk, you probably know what those generational problems are if you live in Arkansas and you've spent any amount of time here. It's poverty, it's dependency, it's broken families, it's state government that's too big and takes too much. It's a crime crisis that has ravaged our state, especially right here in Little Rock, one of the top 5 most violent cities in the country. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to solve those problems. Talked a lot in the first hour about the broken legislative process. We're at the Capitol every single day during legislative session, fighting for you, fighting for taxpayers, and the next generation of Arkansans, my kids, your grandkids, to try to restrain the salacious, insatiable appetite of state government. Because I love this state. It's the best state on earth. It's the best place. I've lived here my whole life. My kids have been born here, and I hope are going to live here their whole lives. And there's nowhere else I want to be because of the people and the culture, the natural resources and the beauty. This is it. This is the best place on earth. But we got to get state government in line with that. We got to get state government caught up with that. And we've got some work to do there. Sorry, I just missed Charles. We had a caller on the line. He hung with us all the way through the break. Charles, if you call back, we'll get you right on, I promise. 501-403-5276. And if any of you out there that want to call or text in, love to hear just what you love about Arkansas. What do you love about Arkansas? I love asking people that question. And a lot of times it's just, man, the people. That's the first thing that almost always comes up. I just love the people here. I met a guy, I mentioned being in Hot Springs last week, met a guy in Hot Springs. He was from Chicago. And I didn't have to ask him why he left Chicago, but I did ask him why he stayed in Arkansas. And that was his answer, the people. The people, man. There's very few other places on this planet where people will stop and hold the door for you and ask you how you're doing and how's your mama and them. And it's not an act. It's real. It's real. And it doesn't really matter if you agree politically even. I hate to air this on the radio, but you guys might as well know because it's all over my social media accounts. I'm a Kentucky basketball fan. That's sometimes a hard thing to be in Arkansas. Sometimes it's a fun thing to be honest. But that's a hard thing to be. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Because it's just such a loving place. And we just take care of each other. And I can hear some of you, well, probably not you, because you're probably not a liberal if you're listening to this show, but, well, Nick, if you love people and you love people so much, why are you against welfare? Why are you against all these government programs? Why don't you want to help people? Because I love people. Because I care about people and their well-being. And I have studied welfare programs, and I've seen people that have been trapped in welfare programs that I know personally. You know them personally. And these programs don't help people. You know, it's so fascinating. We had this whole debate this session over HB 1915. If you want to look it up, we've got some videos out there on the Opportunity Arkansas YouTube page. We've written about this, and it was a bill that was going to massively expand the food stamp program. And I was so fascinated to sit there in the hearing room and listen to the Republican, quote unquote, legislative supporters of this program. And if I remember right, even some of the liberal folks that testified in favor of this bill say things like, well, we all know these programs don't work. We all know these programs don't help people. And they're literally just sitting there saying the quiet part out loud. And what'll really blow your mind is that when you read their bill, I mean, their bill was going to like massively expand food stamps. So I do have to question their sincerity when they say that they believe that these programs don't work. But the point is, like, even the people who want to grow these programs, they know they have to at some point admit that they don't work. They don't help people. Not on net. Not overall. I mean, we've all seen the media headlines and the fake news headlines about this person's life was saved by this government intervention and all these things. And sure, we could come up with anecdotes. But there's a lot of problems with those stories. Number one is that they always assume that that was the only option, right? That if government hadn't stepped in and the big brothers of Little Rock and D.C. hadn't been there to save this person from X tragedy, they would have had nowhere else to go. And of course, that is just pretty much always false. But they also don't even consider if that alternative scenario had played out, not only might that person have survived, but they might have been actually a lot better off. They might have gotten back on their feet quicker. And we have these government programs, we give people these benefits, and we're like, well, we don't want you to be on it forever, but we're going to give it to you. And there may or may not be a time limit. There may or may not be a work requirement, but we really don't want you to stay on it forever, but we're going to give it to you forever. Well, guess what? When you give something to someone forever and you expect nothing in return, you are not helping them. You are literally not helping them. You might be helping yourself by getting a vote or making yourself feel better because you took some money from someone else and gave it to someone that you thought was more deserving, but you certainly didn't help the person that you took the money from. And I'd be willing to bet, and I'd be willing to go toe-to-toe with anyone to say you didn't help the person that you gave the money to either. You didn't teach them anything. You didn't help them get back on their feet. You delayed them getting back on their feet. You pushed out further into the future the point at which they were going to regain their independence and their self-worth and their income and whatever all of those other things are that they needed to get up and out. You just pushed it out further in the future. You didn't solve the problem. You delayed the inevitable. We got a lot to unpack, a lot more to go through with the Arkansas legislative session. We're getting a lot of texts. Would love to have some more calls. 501-403-5276. Nic Horton of Opportunity Arkansas filling in for Steve Finnegan. We've got half an hour left. It's going to be fun. Hang on. Welcome back. News Radio KARN. KARN. Try that again. Oh, what day is it? Wednesday. All right, we're here. Nic Horton of Opportunity Arkansas filling in for Steve Finnegan on the Steve Finnegan Show. We've been talking a lot about the recent Arkansas legislative session, the good, the bad, the ugly. I got some more ugly in here, and we've only got 20 minutes left in the show, so I do want to be sure that we get to some of this. But before we do that, I filibustered on Charles. I feel really bad for that. Charles, if you want to call back in, we'll get you right on the show, I promise this time. But we do have Gary on the line from Benton. So, Gary, thanks so much for calling the Finnegan Show. What's on your mind, brother?
Hey, Nick. God bless you, sir. Appreciate you having me. And I listened to your report this morning on the legislative session, and I have to admit it got me mighty frustrated. While our federal government is finally doing some conservative things and kind of going like gangbusters, the state of Arkansas is far more conservative than our nation is as a whole. So you would think that Arkansas would be leading the way and showing the federal government, hey, this way, this is how it's done. And kind of like DeSantis has done in Florida. He's done an outstanding job of pushing conservatism. And I like what Rush used to say, conservatism works every time it's tried.
Every time. That's
every
right.
time. And if we would continue to phase out the income tax, my point on that, if you look at Texarkana, and I'm not from Arkansas, but I like to say I stayed as fast as I could, when I got here. And if you look at Texarkana, to me, it's a microcosm of what taxes do for you and the burdens that taxes hurt you with. When you go through Texarkana and you're on the Texas side, it's flourishing, it's prosperous. You cross the border and boom, it drops off drastically. It's not geography, it's not terrain, it's not natural resources or anything like that, right? So what's the difference? It's because of the burdens that are put on businesses and put on families, with tax burdens and things like that. I assume, you can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but it seems like one of those things that conservatives should hold up the city of Texarkana as an example and say, hey, look what regulations and tax burdens and things like that do to you. Let's learn from our neighbors. Let's get rid of the income tax and let's let our side of the city line flourish.
Well,
am I right on that? Would you agree, or am I oversimplifying?
No. Well, look, I think you could say oversimplification, whatever, but I think the point holds. It's a great comparison, and it's a great point. Appreciate the call, Gary from Benton. I always think of Memphis and West Memphis. I mean, look at that. Look at that stark contrast. I mean, Tennessee, no state income tax, and certainly Memphis has its issues with crime and other things, but go drive from Little Rock to West Memphis and get across the river bridge and get into Memphis, and it is literally night and day. It's night and day. Now there are a variety of factors, as Gary said, that go into that, and it's not any one thing. But look at Nashville, look at Dallas, look at Austin, look at these huge metropolitan areas. What do they have that we don't? What do they have that we don't? I mean, they don't have better people. They don't have more natural resources. They don't have any better culture. I've been to Austin. I can promise you their culture is not any better than here. I'd take Arkansas 100 times out of 100. But they have no income tax. And they have state governments that I think, frankly, are a lot more business friendly, a lot more taxpayer friendly. I tell folks all the time, the number of kids and friends that I had growing up in White County, that the minute we were out of school, they picked up and moved to Memphis, to Jackson, Tennessee, to the Nashville metropolitan area, or to Dallas, Fort Worth. I can't even count. Dozens and dozens of family and friends. And I tell folks, too, all the time, and I mean it from the deepest part of my heart, one of the reasons I started Opportunity Arkansas, probably the primary reason, is that I don't want that to happen to my kids and my grandkids. because I've lived in Arkansas since I was a little wee pup. And I know how great it is, and I know how great the people are, and how much potential is here. But, potential is worthless if it's never untapped, right? Or never tapped. Potential is worthless unless we unleash it. And the other thing Gary said that I really appreciate, that I want to hone in on a little bit more, is the contrast between what's happening at the federal level and what happened here in Arkansas this session. That makes me about want to jump out of my chair. Because you hit the nail on the head with that, Gary. And I think for me and so many conservatives around the state, that is exactly the frustration. And the whiplash, right? The whiplash of 2023, universal education freedom, massive income tax cuts, welfare reform. I mean, you go down the list, dozens of conservative policy wins to, hold on, time out. And then while we're tapping the brakes or arguably even changing direction on a lot of things, what's happening in D.C.? D.C.? Washington, D.C. is cutting government waste faster than Arkansas is? Like, that, it just makes your head want to explode. It's almost too much to believe, frankly. And look, there, Alabama, Mississippi, tons of states around the country have now started doing their own DOGE-type government reform efforts, like what Elon has been doing at the federal level, and going deep into state agencies and finding waste and corruption and exposing it and getting rid of it. We're not doing that. We're not. I wish we were. We had legislation to do that, and it didn't pass. And I would love to sit here and say, well, maybe it'll happen in the interim. And maybe the state agencies will do it. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe a unicorn will show up and all of a sudden it'll just happen overnight. But if we couldn't do it during session with the momentum of all the other states around us doing it and the federal government doing it, why would we think we could do it in August of a non-election year when nobody's interested or paying attention, and all of a sudden, and then the idea that, right, like state government is going to come in and fix itself? That's a little much. I've actually thought about this a lot. Like, why did DOGE work at the federal level? Why has it been so successful at the federal level? And the reason is because you had an independent perspective, an independent person, like him or not, Elon Musk, who had the utmost trust of the president, and the president said, here's the keys, go find the skeletons. And he had free reign to go do it. And it wasn't, oh, Department of Human Services, why don't you audit yourself and tell us how you could improve? Or fill in whatever government acronym, agency, alphabet soup that you want. That's never going to work. There's literally zero incentive or reason for them to ever do that and to do it well. And so it's a great point, Gary from Benton. I really appreciate the call and the perspective on that, because everything's relative, right? Everything is about context in this world of politics and policy. And even when you can kind of scrape together some good conservative things that happen in this legislative session, you got to look at the bigger picture. You got to look at the state budget growth. You got to look at all the welfare expansions. You got to look at the lack of tax reform. You got to look at the whole picture. And then, to Gary's point, you got to look at, I mean, I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud on the radio, but you got to look at D.C. and realize, well, wait a minute. They're doing more in D.C. to fix the federal government than we're doing in Arkansas right now. And again, we've done some good stuff. I'm confident we're going to do more good stuff. We at Opportunity Arkansas are going to do everything that we can to make sure that that happens and that we do get to zero income tax and that we do get welfare reform across the board and that all of these other things happen. We've got some stuff in the works. Again, I would encourage you to go to our website, go to our social media accounts, because we're going to be doing some of our own waste and corruption research and reporting, specifically focused on Arkansas state government. And so we're not giving up. And I'm not saying it's time to give up. I'm not saying any of that. I'm not saying that there aren't going to be more conservative wins. I think there will be. I'm confident that there will be. Maybe even this year. There could be a special session. There's all sorts of good things that could still happen. But in this moment, at this point in time, in the last quarter, with the session and with what's happening in D.C., if this is a marathon, we've fallen behind. We've fallen behind a lot of states around us very quickly, and we've also fallen behind what's happening at the federal level. You would think the opposite, right? You would think, gosh, if D.C. can do this, surely we could do it in Arkansas. But that's not where we're at this exact moment. We got to go to traffic with Rebecca Davis. Stick around on the Finnegan Show. Steve Finnegan Show. Nic Horton filling in for Steve. NewsRadio 102.9 KARN. Hard to believe we are down to our final segment here. And it has really flown by. Really flown by. But if you'd like to be a part of the show, there is still time. Give us a call or a text, 501-403-5276. 501-403-5276. Would love to hear what you think about the legislative session. We've talked about a lot of it here today. Certainly we haven't covered it all because there were 1,652 bills filed. And there's more than 620 new laws that we are now living under as the peasants of Arkansas. We'll be discovering over the next 18 to 24 months what all those laws are and what they do and trying to figure out how to comply with them and reading all the new regulations that come out of all the state agencies and the bureaucracy that tell us how we can spend our money and where we can go and when we can go there and what we can do when we get there and all of the other wonderful plans that state government has for us. Just don't forget, folks, we're all in this together. Again, the phone number 501-403-5276. Several texts coming in during the break. Want to be sure I get to this one. The first line of it really is the most important, and it's from Sam, and he says, "You're a natural on the radio." And Sam, I just want to say thank you. Flattery will get you everywhere. So I really appreciate that. On a more serious note, the rest of Sam's text here says, "My nephew and his wife have 5 kids and does not have a job. They live 100% off the government. They're both able-bodied and young and both choose not to work. Choose not to work. I do not know how to approach the situation. I've tried several times, but I can't get through to them. Any advice would help." Sam, man, my heart goes out to you. The worst part, the most heartbreaking part of that story is the 5 kids. Because I've studied government dependency and I've studied welfare programs my whole life. And the thing that we have learned beyond a doubt is that government dependency is generational. We talked earlier about government dependency being a generational problem in Arkansas. That's not just a marketing slogan that we use at Opportunity Arkansas. It's a real thing. Government dependency gets handed down and handed down and handed down. The money's handed out and the dependency is handed down. And again, it's not, you can hear it here in Sam's text. I mean, he's heartbroken for his nephew and their kids because they're stuck. And this is why these programs are immoral. I mean, I'll just say it. These programs are immoral. because they tell folks like Sam's nephew and his wife that this is it, y'all. This is good as it's going to get, and you better just hang out and keep cashing the check, and we'll be here to take care of you. Sit at home. Don't go work. Don't have community. Don't have friends. Don't have purpose. Just sit at home and rot away. And we'll take care of you. We, the government, are here to help. The scariest words in the English language right there. And it is destroying people's lives. Like literally destroying people's lives. Because it's telling them that this is it. And Sam, I wish, my heart truly goes out to you. I wish I had better advice. I think, if you've had the conversation, I don't know how else to advise you other than prayer and just continuing to have that conversation. But from a policy standpoint, which is where my head always goes, I mean, this is the problem. And this is why these programs are so broken and so immoral, and they have to be fixed, and we have to reform our welfare system. Because frankly, Sam, a lot of folks are in the same situation that you're in and your nephew and his wife are in, and the only way it's going to change is if we change the system. We change the culture and the system and the programs, and we make sure that these programs are temporary, that they have work requirements, that they're time limited, and that they have clear off-ramps. And that's a fight. We saw it this session. We saw bills. I mentioned HB 1915 by Representative John Eubanks. It was going to double the amount of money that you could have and get food stamps. Double. So we were almost, I mean, that bill passed the House. We were almost actively going in the wrong direction, but then we also failed to reform our Medicaid system, which is our largest welfare program. And a lot of people don't know that, but it is by and far our largest welfare program. Almost 1 in 3 Arkansans are trapped in that program. Almost 1 in 3. And we're not getting healthier. Like, it's supposed to be a health care, a health coverage, health insurance, whatever you want to call it, program. We're not getting healthier. Look at the numbers. We've had Medicaid expansion for able-bodied adults for over a decade now in Arkansas, and we have not moved an inch. We spent a heck of a lot of money, and we've enriched a lot of CEOs at Blue Cross Blue Shield and a lot of state bureaucrats, but we haven't helped the people of Arkansas. Period. And I got to start landing the plane here, because if I'm not careful, I'm going to run out of time. I just want to say thanks again to Steve for having me in. Toby as well. If you want to learn more about our work, it's so important. And I don't just say that because I'm the one doing it or because I'm the one that started the organization. I started it because it's so important. It's not so important because I started it. But we would love for you to get involved. Go to opportunityarkansas.org. Join our social networks. Join our email list. We publish policy articles that give you a sense of all this stuff that's happening at the Capitol and what it means for you and your family. And it's not this real heady, like think tanky, like, oh, the economic forecast of the blah, 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 blah. It's, hey, this bill's happening and this is what it would do. And this is how much money it's going to cost. And this is how that affects you and your family. I mean, that's what we are doing every single day at Opportunity Arkansas. That's why we exist. We have some really big stuff coming up in the future. Can't go into all of it yet, but I can promise you, if you like the Steve Finnegan Show, if you're a conservative and you like KARN NewsRadio, you're going to like some of the stuff that you're going to see from Opportunity Arkansas in the next 6 to 12 months. I hope to be back with you soon. I will be back with Toby on Wednesday mornings, 7:40 on First News. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless all of you, and we'll talk soon. Keep fighting for Arkansas.